Reload your three-bladed sword. Get comfortable in your leather kirtle or your chainmail bikini. Fire up the wizard van. It's about to get weird. You're listening to Swords Against Madness, a hybrid of storytelling and solo OSR gaming. I am both Dungeon Master and players in a world of weird fiction and pulpy sword and sorcery. The dice create a narrative, and I will turn it into a psychedelic story for your enjoyment. There's no cheating, no special rules to make life easier for my player characters. Just the game, the dice, and a few oracles to help keep things moving along. I will try to keep it PG-13, or at least what PG-13 meant when I was a kid. There will be a little innuendo, and maybe a little over-the-top comic book violence. If it wouldn't have appeared in Goonies or Gremlins, you won't hear it here. Now, it's time to party like it's 1974, with Swords Against Madness. For the second time, Miria woke up coughing. Her head spun and she felt weak. As she tried to sit up, she could feel that there were numerous loose, drained blisters across her back and legs. Where was she? She calmed the spinning in her head long enough to take stock of her surroundings. She was on a simple pallet of sweet grass, one that had become foul with sweat and sickness. The smell of an unwashed body assaulted her nose, and it didn't take her very long to realize that it was her. She had seen better days, and then so had the hut she was in. There were holes ripped or burnt into the walls in places that had been covered over with canvas, nailed in with simple iron spikes. There was no door left, although there were ragged remains of hinges. Just a curtain that let in the pale sunlight of a cloudy day. Her memory came back to her a little quicker this time. She remembered the crash, the strange squid, then Olan and Rhea, and the burnt-out village. She remembered staggering to the shore, and then the gravel jumping up to meet her face. Stiff in a way she associated with cryosleep, a grim, sickening suspicion washed over her, and she lifted her arm to find that, much to her relief, her computer was still strapped to it. Somehow she didn't think that the locals would figure out how to remove it from her. With a wave of her hand, flickering, weak holograms appeared in the air above it. She touched a few, and then listened intently for a sickening sound. She was hot, dangerously hot. And this was a mild case of radiation sickness. She supposed that she should be counting herself lucky to be alive at all, but that would be a very temporary run of luck if she didn't find some kind of healing soon. With a few more taps on various holograms, she managed to call up a connection to the Empyreal's coin. She was surprised and relieved to see that its computer was still online, but she didn't necessarily like what she saw. Medical Bay, it appeared, had been blasted to smithereens before she even entered the atmosphere. And what little anti-radiation nanotech she had been spread into the ocean after impact. Judging by the ambient radiation in the ocean, it at least had slowed the ecological disaster coming on.
At least if the radiation doesn't kill me, I won't be executed by a conservation officer.
Gallows humor had always been one of her fortes. She nearly jumped out of her skin when a voice replied to her.
They would have to find you first, and that doesn't seem very likely now, does it?
It was the voice of the Empyreal's coin. Thank the void, the AI was still active.
Empyreal, I'm really glad to hear from you. Are you okay?
I'm afraid I'm not operating anywhere near optimal at the moment. I will spare you the damage report. It is quite extensive. I am what insurance companies might call a write-off.
Nonsense. I'll have you fixed up in no time, Empyreal.
You appear to have radiation poisoning. but I somehow don't think that this is the cause of this delusional thinking, Miria. I am sorry.
I'm sure I can think of something. Hold on, Empyreal.
I have just over 19 minutes of operational uptime remaining.
Well, what if we put you in standby mode? How long do you have then?
A lot longer. It would seem that my best course of action is to put myself into standby mode and only reactivate myself when you signal, in hopes of being able to use my remaining time to be helpful.
Then what are you waiting for? Get into sleep mode.
Right now, my most pressing way to help you is to run my medical protocol. You have developed a mild case of radiation poisoning. As you know, the body does not recover from radiation exposure naturally, at least not quickly. So long as the radioisotopes remain in your body, they will continue to cause damage over time. Your best course of action is nanotherapy, but I'm afraid every piece of nanotechnology aboard the ship is scattered across the ocean. I don't think bathing in it will help you. They're too scattered. What remaining scans I have in my databanks tells me that there is no chance that the natives have developed nanotechnology. There may be caches left from the world ships that brought them here, and if you are here, then there must be some kind of illegal trade going on. Your best bet is to get off this planet, or at least find some off-worlder and get your hands on basic nanomedicine at any cost. Try not to delay. I am detecting energy signatures. That may be a modern power source. You could try to find them using the sensors in your bracer, although it might take a great deal of time. You could also look into local legends. Perhaps this all-knowing the locals speak of will have some idea about how you could find off-world technology. Try not to spend too much time with them though. They may not have the resources you need, and you may present a hazard to them.
Just how bad is my radiation poisoning, Empyreal?
Do you remember how you used to say that you do not want children? That is not a worry now. Oh dear, that was inappropriate. I appear to have lost some of my social filtering circuitry.
It's fine. I needed the laugh.
I am going to go into hibernation mode now, Miria. If you need me, send a wideband signal. The systems I am putting into place should hear them. I have 16 minutes of operational time left. Use them wisely.
With that, the friendly voice faded, and Miria was alone. She took a ragged breath and steeled herself. The clock was ticking, and she didn't have time to feel sorry for herself. She set up a quick algorithm on her computer to occasionally check in on the remaining time on Empyreal. It wasn't
16.
particularly useful,
16.
but it would make her feel better.
16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16. 16.
It would seem that Miria's luck has finally run out. I sat down with the Mythic Game Master emulator and asked it a few questions about the various threads that I'd created. One of them was the idea that maybe Miria had radiation poisoning or worse from her time spent sitting on top of the ship. And it said not just yes, but extreme yes. That radiation poisoning was a clear and present danger for Miria. I wasn't entirely happy with the result at first, but then I realized it gave a serious sense of urgency as long as she was a player character. So long as Miria was suffering from a slow, poison death, she was going to keep moving no matter what. She had an incentive to awaken the all-knowing, to look into any signs of alien technology, to try and find the illegal traders coming up and down. It gave the campaign a sense of urgency and motivation that I desperately needed. It also gives her a clear motive for everything she does from here on in. If she wants to live, she's going to have to be hungry for it. As for rules for radiation poisoning, I've actually generated some for Swords and Wizardry for a previous campaign I designed, and I decided to keep those here. They're based roughly on AD&D's rules for disease. So long as Miria is suffering from radiation poisoning, she will not gain new hit points when she levels up, and she will not be able to regain hit points naturally. That last one is not that big a deal given the fact that she only has 1 hit point to begin with. But it will make this campaign a lot more dangerous for her, as long as she's unable to find the cure she needs. I've also added it to my list of threads that Mythic tracks. Whenever you roll for a random event, you roll on a D100 table to determine whether that event is PC negative or PC positive, or whether it moves a thread along. Like, does it make you come closer to resolving a problem, or does it make the problem worse? This is really convenient because what it means is that I have a way of randomly determining when the radiation poisoning gets worse for Miria, or if she starts to recover or gets clues as to where she can find a cure. If Mythic tells me, for example, that we're getting even closer to the plot where Miria is in danger from radiation poisoning, I'll cause an effect. She'll have a scene where another symptom shows up, and I'll have it reflect in a loss of 1d3 points from one of her physical ability scores at random. If she can get the medicine she needs, she'll begin healing those lost ability score points, and roll for any hit points she might have gained from leveling up. If I roll that we're moving away from the thread where she's dealing with dangerous radiation poisoning, I'll give her a clue on a way she can find a cure. But Mythic was pretty adamant when I asked it whether or not a cure disease spell or a cure poison spell would work. The answer was no. No magical means of healing is going to help her. Nothing short of a wish or a miracle in any case. I'd say that's enough doom and gloom for now, and it's time to give Miria a break. It's time to give her some allies and let her get to know the people who've saved her life, even if they have no idea how to heal her. Maybe she can do them a solid, at the very least. And there's still the matter of the Gorum, whatever they are. Let's get rolling.
Let me go, please. No, I won't tell anyone. I won't say where you are. Just let me go.
Quiet, you! The master took very little notice of the prisoner as he was being dragged in. He was far more interested in the pit. The resting place of the Gorum sat deep in one of the most tangled, twisted parts of the jungle. A place where the plant matter itself seemed as corrupt and warped as the creatures below. Here, the soil of the forest floor was brushed away, revealing some ancient metal structure below, and in the middle of that, a hole, surrounded by jagged tendrils of metal reaching up towards the sun like perverse plants. The stench that came from the pit always offended his nose. He looked upon his dearest concubine, a creature that had once been a woman, that he had transformed, molded into a shape that pleased him. Extra arms, extra eyes. To him at least, she was perfection itself, and distracted him from the distasteful work at hand. "Master," the acolyte said, "I've brought you the sacrifice you demanded. Another one of the halflings of the deep jungle."
"Get over here, rat!"
"Peace, Halu. There's no need to be unkind to our guest. He should enjoy his time with us. Don't you agree?"
The brute called Halu, who dragged the halfling along at the end of a length of rusty chain, did not agree. Halflings were less than human. They were vermin. There was no need to make anything pleasant for them, but he didn't dare gainsay his master. As if he could divine his minion's thoughts, the master decided to give him a different distraction.
"Halu, take my lady home. This heat does not agree with her. Guard her with your life, won't you?"
The simple-minded Halu beamed with joy at his master's trust. This was something he could do to prove himself. He took the hands of the strange once-woman and led her away. "Come, my lady. Let's leave the master to his business." "Should I go as well, master?" The master cast his gaze once again on the villager, the acolyte, who cowered almost immediately by reflex, looking away so they didn't have to meet the master's strange gaze.
"No, you did so very well by bringing my attention to the stranger, and in doing so you signed her death warrant. You could go places with me, my son. I see a great destiny ahead of you, but first, I need to see that you have the mettle to do the next step.
No,
With a lump in his throat, the acolyte pulled the halfling closer to the pit, breathing raggedly as he did so. He consoled himself that no one, not even the master, was quite sure what would happen to the halfling when he was down there. Only that the opportunity to enjoy someone's suffering would wake the Gorum, and they would soon reply to the master's call. "I'm sorry. It's for the greater glory." He didn't believe the words, but they gave him some comfort as he cast the halfling, chains and all, into the pit. He stared at the master, hoping for a sign of approval, or to be reminded of the incredible glory of the being that he served. As a kindness, the master waved, telling him that he could now depart. He left before he could hear any signs of the Gorum stirring, or what they might do down below.
Do you like your tabletop RPGs to be grim, gritty, and grounded? If so, then Legend of the Bones is the podcast for you. A hybrid of dark fantasy audio drama and old-school solo D&D. In Legend of the Bones, the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone.
Miria walked slowly up the beach in the company of Rhea, trying to get used to the sensation of motion again, after she had laid unconscious for days. The nurse who had been in charge of caring for her had been apologetic. The people of this village didn't truly understand radiation. They didn't know what it was. But apparently they had enough experience with it to know it when they saw it, and they knew that it made her skin poisonous. So they hadn't dared give her a sponge bath. Medical treatment for her burns had been done quickly and carefully. Once she was awake, they made sure that no one was going to toss anything into one of the rivers that opened into the sea passing the village. She stood at the mouth of the harbor and washed as best she could where the water was mostly fresh. Then she had pulled on the simple, woven gown they had given her. The technology of the culture was an enigma to her. They had metal. The village's guards carried steel-headed spears and wore a mix of leather and mail. And yet their huts were simple affairs of lashed bamboo. Something interesting had happened here. If she were more of an anthropologist, she would probably already be taking notes. As it was, they saw her as a divine emissary of the stars. Not a role she even remotely cherished. Slowly, with Rhea at her side, she passed through a crowd gathered in a ring around the town's meeting place. A simple square of packed dirt with several totems around its edges, and a platform sheltered by a canvas. Lamps of infused oils burned to keep the insects at bay and provide a little light. There were a handful of guards with painted leather shields and metal-tipped spears, wearing elaborate armor around the edges. Guards? No, they were tilers. They were mostly here for symbolic purposes, to give weight to the proceedings. The murmur of the crowd died down, and they parted, giving her a wide berth as she entered the circle. A mix of reverence and fear, as to them she was both savior and untouchable.
"Hail to you, Miria, visitor from the stars, waker of the all-knowing,"
declared an old and toothless man, clearly the voice of the village.
"Come forth, speak to us, tell us the words we have been waiting to hear, and inform us as to why you have come."
His broad ritual gestures, his rapturous smile told Miria exactly what they were hoping for. She'd racked her brains trying to decide how she was going to handle these people. How was she going to play this? She had considered playing the mysterious deity from the stars and seeing how far it went. but she had already clearly made herself as mortal as can be. Besides, smuggler and thief though she might be, she certainly was no con artist. She had some scruples. These people didn't deserve to have their very faith used as a weapon against them. No, she had decided she would tell them the truth and hopefully get their help. After all, waking this all-knowing, if that was even within her power, was probably going to save her life. All the same, while she sat in the river, she had gone over the warp forms on her bracer and planned her moves in case she upset them. She knew a technique to make people think she was her friend by using the warp to bend their minds. She actually hated that she knew it. It seemed contrary to her own ethos of freedom. But it had saved her life more than once. The trouble was it worked on only one person, and it sure as hell ruined all trust and respect once its use was discovered. No, if things got out of hand, she had prepared a sleep effect. One that would render a crowd of people unconscious, just in case she needed to make a run for it. She walked through the open center and up onto the podium. She took a deep breath and went through the speech she had planned in her head. Rhea followed by her side, a sword on her hip. She got the impression that Rhea was as much guard and jailer as she was companion, but the company of the quiet girl was still welcome. Her cousin Olan, the one who had talked to her when she got on the rowboat, he also stood there, armed, next to the spot she was pretty sure they wanted her to stand. So, they'd fished her out of the ocean, she was their responsibility. Fair enough.
Ba weep, grana weep ninny bong. I know you've been waiting a long time to hear these words. I wish that I could say that they were given to me by a wise space god, that I was here to start a golden age. But I will not lie to you. I learned these words from a trader, a member of a group of sailors of the stars called the Tracy Syndicate. The Tracy, they're liars. They find worlds where people have forgotten that they too came from the stars. They show these people wonders and miracles that they had forgotten, and then give them false prophecies. They take offerings and sacrifices that their innocent victims give them, and make sure that if they are ever stranded, they are treated like kings. I will not do that to you. If the Tracy left this all-knowing here, it is a tool they intended to use to help them in an emergency, and it may yet help you restore your village. If I can awaken your all-knowing, I will, but I wanted to start on a grounds of truth so that I didn't give you false hope or feed on false prophecies.
But neither Miria nor the crowd had much attention left for her speech. Twisted, hulking forms, dressed in armor made of cobbled-together shards of metal and flesh, tore their way through the town, demolishing everything they could lay their hands on, and shattering flesh and bone with bare hands or cleaving it with blades on every unfortunate that came within reach. One of the largest scanned the crowd, its fists already dripping with blood and human hair, its snarling, skulled face a horrible parody of a human one. And then it set its eyes on Miria and raised its fist. With a bellow, it managed to gain the attention of its fellows from their rampage just long enough to point Miria out before they all surged towards the rapidly fleeing crowd. Time for battle.
This is an attack from the Gorum, a custom creature I created. I racked my brain trying to figure out exactly what I wanted them to be. I knew I wanted them to be intelligent and malicious, and generally stupid and brutal. It wasn't until I was going through my CD collection and spotted my old copy of Scumdogs of the Universe I knew what I wanted. The Gorum are indestructible space barbarians. I'll be sharing my description in the notes, but essentially they are tougher than humans, tougher than even orcs. But they're also dumb as dirt. They can't be killed. If they are taken down to 0 hit points, they come back in 1d6 turns unless their brains are destroyed by magic. Otherwise, they just come back uglier and meaner than before. They also get to roll twice on any saving throw thrown their way. 9 Gorum total are charging into battle. On the defending side, we have Olon, Rhea, Miria. The nurse who patched Miria up, Nika, is also present. I'm going to roll morale to see if she's going to participate. I guess she's running too. The Gorum have definitely given up the element of surprise as they charge in, smashing and crushing anything in their path. And so, I'm not going to worry about rolling for surprise. The defending side wins the initiative. Miria takes a deep breath and draws the warp energy she stored in her body, flinging a pulse of magical energy that washes over a knot of the Gorum and several of their victims, knocking out 5 of the Gorum and 2 townsfolk. That's going to even the odds a bit. The guards, with screams as much terror and fear as they are courage, charge in to meet the Gorum. One of them manages to rush forward and deal a grazing blow to one of the largest and meanest of the Gorum. The others, they are unable to land anything like a serious hit. The Gorum's flesh is a knot of scar tissue sewn with plates of metal directly into the skin. One of the Gorum rushes in and slashes a guard with a weapon made out of a human femur and flint into a rough axe. That guard manages to withstand the blow, although he coughs blood as he tries to stagger to his feet, only to have his head cleft off by a second one. Rhea steps into a position where she's between Miria and an onrushing Gorum. While her eyes always look perpetually confused and frightened, her face is a mask of stern determination. She grabs hold of her saber and slashes one of the incoming Gorum. Her blade deflects across the thick leathery flesh, but has enough force to stop its advance. Olon draws his sword and closes in on the same rushing Gorum, and manages to strike it in the armpit, causing a torrent of blood as the creatures scream with rage. Meanwhile, the crowd and the elders manage to get clear of the battlefield, leaving only our brave and desperate defenders to hold off the creatures. The Gorum have the initiative on the second round. The largest of the Gorum brings up a weapon, a glaive of knotted wood, iron spikes, and shards of ancient metal turned into a blade, and slashes it at a guard, causing him to lose part of a hand, while the guard stands bravely in the face of the brutal attack. The one that charged directly at Miria takes a swing at Rhea, but she ducks under the blow. A third Gorum, the one who had badly wounded a guard the previous round, loses his axe as he swings, burying it in the side of a building so deep he can't pull it out. His ally, waiting for a target to be doubled over to smash, can't quite find the target he's looking for. The wounded guard misses an attack, but his fellows drive in and manage to bring down one of the Gorum with a flurry of spear blows. Rhea growls with frustration as she delivers a flurry of blows to the Gorum who tried to rush Miria, but doesn't manage to connect. Olon tries to get behind the brute. Unfortunately, as his blade arcs for the spine, he discovers that the creature has threaded metal rings through its own skin, and the blade glances off. Miria, for her part, has a moment of foolish bravery. She grabs hold of a discarded spear left behind by one of the guards who fled. She turns it over to use as a staff, a weapon she's more familiar with, and rushes forward, driving her spear hard over the head of Rhea, and manages to connect to the Gorum's forehead with a sickening thud. The creature loses consciousness and crumples to the ground. The largest Gorum, now in a blood rage from the battle, raises his weapon and dispatches a guard in a single blow. Rhea lets out a strangled sound of pain and surprise. That had been a cousin of hers. She turns to rush to join the battle, but trips over some debris, losing her sword. It's going to take a moment for her to regain her footing. Olon pulls a dagger from his belt and flings it at the largest Gorum, but it goes wide, sinking into a wooden post beside the creature. The monster turns and grins at him with sharp teeth and hefts his weapon. Olon is his next toy. Looking around desperately for an opportunity to join the fight, but not to get in close again, realizing how much of a fool she'd been, Miria spots a large pot of oil, grabs it and throws it down on the battlefield between her and the Gorum, before grabbing a torch off of a sconce. She's not much of a fighter, but she's good at dirty tricks. The surviving guards are terrified but somehow decide to stand their ground and fight to the bitter end. One of them, his hands sweaty, drops his spear, but another manages to drive his blade into the hip of the largest Gorum, causing it to bellow with fury. Rhea, pulling herself off the ground and grabbing her saber, leaving her shield where it may, takes advantage of the creature's wild thrashings to come in and run her blade straight into its gut. It turns and growls at her, grabbing hold of her blade so that she can't get away as it raises its weapon. Olan's dagger sails over the creature's head. With her trap ready and hoping it won't be noticed amongst the slicks of blood, Miria grabs hold of her bullhorn and taunts the Gorum.
I know what you are, Filth, and I know how you can die. Come and get me before I teach them how to kill you properly. Don't stop them. They're after me, after all.
The two Gorums still standing take a moment bewildered by the sudden sound and fury. Even with his death grip on Rhea's saber, the largest can't quite seem to land a hit in all the confusion. Rhea takes advantage of that to pull her blade free of the creature's hands, causing a rain of fingers to drop at its feet, then spins and cleaves its head from its shoulders. The last Gorum turns in astonishment, looking at its leader's head falling from its shoulders, long enough for one of the guards to get hold of a spear and drive it straight through the creature's back into its gut. It lets out one final howl of fury before it collapses to the ground.
End of combat.
Miria lets out a ragged breath and flings the torch well away from the oil, then raises the bullhorn to her lips one last time.
They're not dead. Not yet. Not really. Quickly, gather them all up. I'll show you how to make sure they stay dead this time.
Thank you so much for listening to Swords Against Madness. It has been written, directed, and performed by Brian C. Ryder, and produced by Stormhead Productions. For show notes, character stats, spells, monsters, and other game content, visit us at swordsvmadness.stormheadproductions.ca. This episode included sound effects and music from Pixabay, as well as songs generated by Brian C. Rideout using Suno AI. If you want to find me on social media, find me on X at Stormhead Audio, or visit the Stormhead Productions site on Facebook. I am incredibly grateful to the entire solo TTRPG podcasting community. I've had such an incredible welcome for the first episode of Swords Against Madness. I hope this one lives up to your expectations. I also feel truly blessed that Simon Williams, creator of Legend of the Bones, appears on this episode as the voice of Empyreal. Legend of the Bones is one of the biggest inspirations for this podcast. If you haven't listened to it, I can't recommend it enough. You're in for a treat. And until next time, roll hard, think weird, and party like it's 1974.